Okay, we are Bezrat Hashem holding on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. Okay, so says the Gemara, Ba'u minem Rav Sheshet, Arel mahu b'maaser. So we know that an Arel is not allowed to have Truma, an Arel is not allowed to have Korban Pesach. So what about Maaser? Is an Arel allowed to have Maaser? So that was the question. Do we say the same way that we learn that an onen is asur by maaser, so too is asur by Pesach? So also we're going to learn that an arel who's asur by Pesach, we learn that back to maaser and say that an arel is asur to have maaser. Or dilma chamur mikal yalif, kal michamur lo yalif. Or do we say it's not really a gezerah shava between korban pesach and maaser, and we'll learn the more strict thing from the more lenient thing, but we are not going to learn the more lenient thing, which is maaser, from pesach, which is the more strict thing. So amar luhu tinitua. So this was the question that they asked from Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said tinitua. We have it in a braita. I have proof for you in a braita. What is the braita? It says truma v'bikurim. So this braita is going to list things that truma and bikurim have in common that maaser does not. So if it's true that an arel is not allowed to have maaser, it should not be listed here. If an arel is allowed to have maaser, it should be listed here. It's something that truma and bikurim will have in common that it won't apply to maaser. So let's see. Truma v'bikurim chayavim alehem mita. If someone eats them with tuma, he's chayav mita. V'chomesh, and if a zar eats it by shogeg, he has to pay extra fifth. V'asurin lezarim, a zar is not allowed to have it. V'nichse kohen, they belong to the kohen. Ve'olin be'echad u'me'ah, and in order for it to become batel, maaser, or truma, or bikurim, it has to be batel in 1 in 100, as opposed to maaser, which is only batel berov. Vetuanin rechitzat yadayim veherev shemesh. In order to eat it, the kohanim need to wash their hands, and it needs to be the nightfall after going to the mikveh. So hare'elu bitruma ubikurim mashen kem maaser. So these are things that apply to truma and bikurim and do not apply to maaser. So says the Gemara, ve'im ita, if it's true that an arel is allowed to have maaser, so then nitni arel asur bahen mashen kem maaser. Another thing that could have been on the list is that an arel kohen is not allowed to have truma or bikurim, but an arel can have maaser. That wasn't on the list, so it sounds like an arel is not allowed to have maaser. So that was Rav Sheshet's answer. So says the Gemara, Tana v'shayir. It's not necessarily true, because maybe this braita just listed a few things, but it left out a few things also. There are a few other things that could go on this list. So if you're going to say that, you have to prove that there are things missing on the list. Once you prove that there are things missing on the list, so then we can say, Tana v'shayir, that the braita left some things out. So the Gemara says, My shayir dahai shayir. What did it leave out that you're going to say that it left out also arel? So shier de katani seifa. It says in the seifa, the rest of the braita, the second half of the braita, it's really a mishnah. The second mishnah says, Yesh b'maaser bikurim ma'ashe'en ken b'truma. Now we're counting things that maaser and bikurim have in common that do not apply to truma. So she'a maaser ve'abikurim tu'anin havad makom. They need havad makom. They need to be eaten inside of the wall of the city of Yerushalayim. Ve'tu'anin vidui. And maaser and bikurim both have vidui. You can't just eat it. There's a process of how it's brought, and there's something that's said for maaser when it's brought, and something that's said for bikurim when it's brought. V'asur leonen, and an onen is not allowed to have maaser, and onen is not allowed to have bikurim. Truma and onen is allowed to have, like we saw before. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon is matir just bikurim to an onen. V'chayavin bebiur. And either way, the bikurim and maaser need to be cleared out when the zman comes. Whereas truma, there's no zman that it needs to be cleared out by. The kohen could hang on to it for as long as he wants. Rabbi Shimon poter. Rabbi Shimon holds that nachayav in biur. Ve'ilu asur levaer mehen betuma ve'ochlan betumat atzman lokeh Masha'en ken b'truma lo katani. But it doesn't say it's missing two things that should have been on that list. What are the two things? Asur levaer mehen betuma, that he's not allowed to clear them out when they are tameh. And also ochlan betumat atzman. I'm sorry, when he is tameh. And ochlan betumat atzman, he cannot eat them when they themselves are tameh. And if he does, he gets malkut. So masha'en came with truma. That's not true by truma. By truma, if a kohen eats truma, when they are tameh, when the truma is tameh, so he doesn't get malkut. He's over an aseh. So that would be a difference. Lo katani, it doesn't say that's a difference. So al matan v'shayir. So what's the point? The point is we see that was Tana v'shayir. We see that this was missing some things out. So therefore, he can't bring a proof from here that an arel is not allowed to. That an arel is allowed to have maaser. Boker tov. Okay, so now we're gonna go through the this Mishnah that we quoted for a little bit. So we're on the top of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Bet. So he said Asurin Leonen. So Maaser and Bikurim both are asurt for an onen. An onen is not allowed to have Maaser and he's not allowed to have Bikurim, but an onen is allowed to have Truma. So Rabbi Shimon Matir, Rabbi Shimon allows an onen to have Bikurim. So Minalehu, where do they get this from that an onen is asur to have maaser and bikurim? Dichtiv lo tuchal le'echol b'sh'arecha maaser diganecha v'tiroshecha v'yitzarecha uvchorot bekarecha v'tzonecha, etc. And then it says utrumat yadecha. So v'amar mar trumat yadecha elu bikurim. Trumat yadecha is referring to bikurim. Vitkash bikurim l'maaser. And bikurim is connected to maaser because this pasuk says maasar deganecha, etc. And then it says trumat yadecha, which is bikurim. So we connect bikurim to maaser. Ma maaser asur leonen, af bikurim asur leonen. Just like maaser is an onen is not allowed to have, bikurim is an onen is not allowed to have. So Rabbi Shimon, truma karinu rachamana. But Rabbi Shimon says no, it's referred to as truma. So ma truma mutar leonen, af bikurim mutar leonen. Same way the truma is mutar to an onen, bikurim also is mutar to an onen. So that's the machloket in drasha. One says that maaser and bikurim are connected, therefore we learn maaser is asur to an onen, bikurim also. And the other says that bikurim is referred to as truma, therefore bikurim has the halach of truma and it is mutar to an onen. Okay, v'chayavin bebiur. Another thing we said is they're chayav in biur, which means they have to clear them out when the right time comes. Bikurim and maaser, but not truma. Rabbi Shimon poter. So Rabbi Shimon says that bikurim is like truma, and you don't need to clear it out at when the zman comes. So mar makish, one opinion, the opinion that says that bikurim also needs to be cleared out. You need biur. He holds that we connect bikurim to maaser, and we learn from maaser. Umar lo makish. Another one, he doesn't make a hekesh from bikurim to maaser. He learns bikurim is like truma, and it doesn't need biur. Okay, we're holding by Ayin Gimel Amud Bet. First word on the line is poter, and then it says v'asur levayer. It's towards the top, maybe like 10 lines down. V'asur levayer ma'en betuma. So we said that a person he's obligated when it comes to maaser and bikurim, so it has to be cleared out by the right time. After the time, he has to get rid of them. If the zman comes and he didn't do what he's supposed to do with it, it wasn't eaten, it wasn't given, he has to clear it out with maaser and with bikurim. He has to clear it out, and if he doesn't clear it out, he has to destroy it.
Maaser has a time to it?
Yes, they're different. We're talking about maaser. We're talking about I believe we're talking about maaser sheni. But either way, yes, maaserot have a cycle of when they're supposed to be given. But the point is, asur levaer mehen betuma. He's not allowed to burn them when they are tameh. Also, ve'ochlan betumat atzman loke. Another halacha by bikurim and maaser is if somebody eats them when they themselves are tameh, even though the I'm sorry. When the food itself is tameh, but the person is tahor, they get malkut. So minalan. How do we know these things? Detanya. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo bi'arti mimenu betameh. So the pasuk says, this pasuk is written by Maaser. It's part of the vidui Maaser. He says, Lo bi'arti mimenu betameh. I didn't burn it or destroy it or use it betum'ah. Ben shani tameh ve'u tahor. Ben shani tahor ve'u tameh. Right? This sounds like whether I was tameh and the Maaser was tahor, or whether I was tahor and the Maaser was tameh. I didn't use it when I was tameh or when it was tameh. So where do we see that there's an azhara on the eating of it? Eni yodea. Says the bright, it's unclear. I don't know. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Tumat haguf behed yaktiv be. It says specifically tumat haguf. It says specifically if the person is tameh that he cannot eat the maaser. It says nefesh asher tigabo v'tameh ada arev lo yochal min hakodashim. And kodashim is referring to maaser ki im rachatz besaro b'mayim. He has to go to the mikveh. So the Gemara says you're right, but this is hachikami ba'ayele. This is what we're asking. Tumat atzmo minayin. When the food is tameh, how do we know that it cannot be eaten? Talmud lomar lo tuchal lechol bish'arecha ma'asar diganecha. So one pasuk says you can't eat bish'arecha, the maaser. Ulhalanu omer bish'arecha tochelenu hatameh v'hator yachdav katzevi v'chayal. And regarding this pasuk is regarding psulei mukdashin, meaning after, right, after something was made hekdesh and it became pasul and they were podeit. So it says bish'arecha tochelenu hatameh v'hator yachdav. Tameh and tahor person could eat it together. Katzevi v'chayal. That a tameh and a tahor could eat that on one table, and they don't worry about it. So on that, by maaser it says bish'arecha, and by psulei muktashim it also says bish'arecha. So over there it says bish'arecha tochelenu, that by psulei mukdashim you can eat it bish'arecha, which means a tameh and a tahor could eat it together, and we don't worry. One second. By psulei mukdashim, by maaser, because it doesn't matter if it becomes tameh. That's fine. It doesn't matter if it becomes tameh. But by psulei hamukdashim, by maaser, that we care about. The pasuk says lo tuchal echol bish'arecha. You can't eat it bish'arecha the same way that you could eat psulei mukdashim, which means you can't eat it tameh and tahor together. That's a special thing only by psulei mukdashim that we're podeh, that tameh and tahor could eat it together, and it doesn't. We don't worry about it.
No, you said yes.
There's difference between maaser and psulei mukdashim.
Maaser is not a problem.
No, maaser. The halacha is that there's a special halacha by psulei muktashim that the Torah says bish'arecha tochelenu hatameh v'hator yachdav. So we learn from there. It says the pasuk in the Torah. So we learn from there that a tameh and a tahor could eat from the same bowl. That's a special halacha by psulei muktashim. But where by maaser it says lo tuchal lechol bish'arecha. You can't eat bish'arecha. The thing that I told you over there, bish'arecha tochelen, you can't do over here. So you can't eat maaser, a tameh and a tahor together. Which means, at the end of the day, what comes out is maaser cannot be eaten whether the person is tameh and the food is tahor, or whether the food is tameh and the person is tahor. Either way, the maaser cannot be eaten. Okay, that's what we're coming at. Okay.
Maaser is more important than
maaser. We're talking about maaser sheni. No.
How come you say kodesh?
No, psulei. That means it became pasul. You were podeh. Yeah. You were right. Okay. Masha'en kein bitruma. So we're by the two dots. Says masha'en kein bitruma. Minalan. We're ayin gimel amud bet. Masha'en kein bitruma. So we said that by truma you are allowed to burn it or get rid of it when it is tameh. Whereas by maaser and bikurim, you cannot get a usage of it when it's tameh. You can't use it as a flame or as a fire to cook with or something like that. So minalan, how do we know this? Amar Rabbi Avahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Kra, it says in the pasuk, Lo bi'arti mimenu betameh. It says, I wasn't mivaer it, I didn't get a burning use from it, betuma. So mimenu iata mavir, that's by maser, but avalata mavir shemen shel truma shenitma. But you could use oil of truma that became tameh for candle, right? But maaser you cannot. Ve'ema mimenu yata ma'avir avalata ma'avir shemen shel kodesh. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. So we have a pasuk that says mimenu. Mimenu teaches me it's specific to maaser and is coming to exclude something else. Good. So there's a rule that when maaser becomes tameh, you can't use it as fuel, right? So fine. Maybe we're saying that halacha is we're saying maaser can't be used as fuel, but truma can be used as fuel when it's tameh. So the Gemara says, how do you know that's the drasha to make? Maybe make the drasha like this: maaser cannot be used as fuel, but kodesh that became tameh can be used as fuel. So the Gemara says, lav kal v'chomerhu, that you should have a kal v'chomer that kodesh, if maaser cannot be used when it becomes tameh for fuel, for sure kodesh cannot be used for fuel when it becomes tameh. Ma maaser hakal, maaser which is more lenient than kodesh, amra Torah lo bi'arti mimenu betameh, that you can't use it as fuel when it becomes tameh. Kodesh chamur lo kol sheken, kodesh which is more strict than maaser, of course you cannot be able to use it as fuel if kodesh became tameh. If oils of kodesh became tameh, for sure you should not be able to use it as fuel if you can't use maaser oils as fuel when they become tameh. So Gemara says, Yachi truma nami. If that's the case, then truma also is more strict than maaser. So just say, maaser, if maaser becomes tameh, you can't use it as fuel. So for sure truma. So the Gemara says, truma nami kal v'chomeru. So the Gemara says, haktiv mimenu. The pasuk says mimenu, right? So we learn mimenu applies to maaser, and it's coming to exclude something else. So basically, we're left here with, we're kind of stuck. On the one hand, we have a drasha that says mimenu, that this rule that if it becomes tameh, you cannot use it for fuel, you can't use maaser for fuel, but there is something else that you can use, either truma or kachim. But on the other hand, we have a kal v'chomer. So one thing is going to be included, one thing is going to be excluded. Either we're going to say, you can't use maaser that becomes tameh for fuel, but you could use truma, or we're going to say you can't use maaser that becomes tameh, but you could use kodesh. So which one is it? So am I right? How come, what do we see to include in the isur kodesh oil, but exclude truma oil? That truma is allowed to be used for fuel when it becomes tameh. Why do we choose truma? So mistabra kodesh lo mimaitna. It makes sense that kodesh should not be excluded. Sheken pe nun kuf ayin chaf samech. It has all of those chumras. What are they? Pigul. It's an acronym, abbreviation for the following. On pigul, notar, korban. Right. It's pigul will apply to it, which is wrong machshavot in the avoda. Notar, if it's extra or left over, there, depending on what type of kodesh it is, they're different. It has to be gotten rid of. Korban, it has the status of a korban because it's kodesh. Me'ilah, once it's been donated, me'ilah applies to it. That if somebody has hana'ah from it on shogeg, he has to bring a special korban. Karet, it's also karet if the wrong person, if someone eats it when he's tameh. Asur le'onen, also an onen is not allowed to have kodesh. So it has all these chumras over truma. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, truma lo memaitna sheken mem ched pe zayin. Truma also has chumras over kodesh. Number one, mita. Truma, if Zar eats truma, chayav mita. Chomesh, he has to pay an extra fifth if he eats truma by mistake. Whereas if someone by mistake eats kodesh, he doesn't have to pay extra. Ein la pidyon, you can't redeem it. Kodesh, if someone gave something to Kodesh, he was makdish something, so he can redeem it. Whereas by Truma, you can't redeem it. He can't go trade in something for Truma. V'asur zarim, and Truma is never allowed to a non-Kohen. Kodesh, some Kodesh, is allowed to a non-Kohen. So hanach nefishin, you're right, but the chumras of Kodesh are more than the chumras of Truma. Therefore, Kodesh stays asur, and you cannot use Kodesh that became tameh as fuel. Whereas Truma, we're excluding from this pasuk of Mimenu, we're saying it only applies to Maaser, this rule, not to Truma, and by Truma that becomes tameh, a person would be able to use it as fuel. Karet adifa, or I could tell you karet is adif. Karet is stronger, and therefore, since by Kodesh you have karet, that makes it more chamur, and therefore that stays asur. But Truma is where we learn that it would be mutar. So
would you just explain a little bit?
Yes.
I got confused.
So I'm gonna explain.
This is the longest acronym I think I've ever seen. All shots.
Okay, let's
People just
do.
know what this word means when they see it.
No, it said it right afterwards. It's just a siman.
Oh, okay.
It's not a. Let's read a few more lines. Let's get to the top of the very top of the next amud, and then I'm gonna explain outside everything. I just want the camera only has like a little bit of battery left. It's gonna die. So let's finish it, and then I'll turn off and explain. So ve'ochlan betumat atzman. So another halacha we said is by bikurim and maaser, which does not apply to truma, is someone who ochlan betumat atzman loke, that if somebody ate bikurim or maaser, and the thing that he ate was tameh, he gets malkut. Masha'en ken b'truma, which is not true by truma. He doesn't get malkut. So the Gemara says milkahu delolaki. If he eats truma when it's tameh, he doesn't get malkut. Ha'isura ika, but there is an isur. There's an isur, he just doesn't get malkut. So minalan, where does this isur come from? So Amar Kra, it says in the pasuk, bish'arecha tochelenu. It says by, again, psulei hamuktashin, something that became pasul that he redeems. So you can eat it b'sharecha tochelenu. So lezeh velo le'acher. So this you can eat b'sharecha, but not something else. It's coming to teach us that there's an isur. It's written in the form of an aseh, but it's coming to teach us that there's an isur to eat something else when it becomes tameh. So v'lav haba mechlal aseh, and it's a lav that comes through an aseh, so it really has the status of an aseh. You can't get malkut from it. Amar Rav Ashi says miresha nami shemat mina detana v'shayer. So this whole Gemara was proving that the Braita that we brought on the previous Amud was missing out some things. So we proved from the Seifa, but the Gemara is now going to prove from the Reisha. Midilo katani v'nohagin b'shar shenei shavua. From the fact that it doesn't say that Truma and Bikurim, as opposed to Maaser, apply on all other years, where Maaser does not apply on all years. Ve'en lahem pidyon. And also Truma and Bikurim, you cannot redeem, where once they're given, whereas Maaser could be redeemed. Maaser Sheni, you could be poded on money and take it. Masha'en ken Maaser, right? Maaser is different. Shema mina. Okay, so we'll have a few